Okay, I think we're all going.
We're away with the fairies now, are we, for a time?
Yeah.
Righty-ho. Well, I've sorted out some things from my original writings that I thought I would read to you today, and I would also tell you about a trip to Glastonbury that we made, which was pretty magical and involved all sorts of things. So I'm not going to start with that. Some people, I'm sure most people will know about Glastonbury, but it is a really magical place. And I've been there with Margot, and I've been there with Reg, and I've climbed the Tor, and I climbed the Tor with someone who's just passed, and he looked like a wizard. And we were walking up the Tor. I was walking up with Yvonne and John had this long beard and ponytail tied in a bun on the top. And this little child came up to him and he said, "Are you a wizard?" And John said, "Yes, I am." It's just lovely, things like that stay in your memory. Blessed John, he's just passed on to the next world, and I'm sure he's quite happy to have gone. However, I'd also like to tell you that Margot's husband passed in 1991, and the work I'm talking about today happened in 1992. I may mention the Crystal Room, and that was a room at the bottom of Margot's house, which was very derelict, and we were asked to do it up. So Reg and I went in there and did it up, completely transformed it, and this was where a lot of her work was done, and it was known as the Crystal Room, and she had meetings there and people would come and she would talk to them. So I may mention that here as well. So that's just to show where it is. And also the crystal work that we did together, although we didn't do it there, I suppose, I don't know when it started really, I can't remember, 1991, 92, and it was after Wally died. And we did crystal scrying together with Mary Madison and got into all our lives in Lemuria. Atlantis was mentioned, but briefly, but mostly Egypt at the time of Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh. So we did quite a lot of work on that, and that's the book I wrote called Timeless Experiences, Crystal Magic. So today I'm going to tell you about, we had a field we used to go to just above Knighton, and we called it Seven Sisters Field because just down below there's Seven Sisters Road. I don't know what it's really called, it's by Knighton Radio. And we would often go there and receive information, and this particular day Mary Anning came with us. Margot and I were there, and Mary Anning in spirit was with us, and she said, she was going to tell me of my lives with Ramunus and Rachel. Now Ramunus was the young man who had died down the well that I mentioned in another of my talks, and Rachel had had the experience of staying in the attic at the Grove, and she had seen the arm of someone come round the door at night and been very frightened. And Rachel lived with us for a year or perhaps more than a year. So she's one of my adopted daughters, as you might say. And I'm very fond of her. I'm still in contact with her. And this is what Mary Anning had to say. I promised I would tell Carolyn about the man she knew as Ramunus. He was living near her when she lived in York and was a thief. She knew he stole something from a relative of hers, yet she would not give him away, as he would have been hung for theft in those days. Well, I certainly wouldn't have given him away today. He was such a beautiful, beautiful young man. So he was back in my life again. As for the lady named Rachel, Her life was linked there in ancient Peru, a civilization long gone and hardly remembered. Rachel lived in the same village, and Carolyn was a crippled old lady who Rachel, who was then a boy, helped with gathering wood for her. Yet he stole her chicken. That is where they had been together. The year is not recorded. It was so long ago before history began, or before history was made. She said, I hope I have answered her questions. If she comes to you tonight, her guide should speak, and maybe I may have more to say if time is early enough. I never speak, apart from reincarnation evenings after 8:30 p.m, as you term it. Spiral high. I wanted to tell you both why you are together so often, and in past lives many times. It goes back to the time in Lemuria, when you were both there in the beginning. You have been there several times, but this was the first time there, and you were both men who were very clever and very powerful, and through some secret formula you made with crystal power, making it stronger, you made a vow to be together again and again, and it worked. Several more people who you neither know in this life did it, and they too have a strong bond. You both wanted to know, and I do not know the formula, but as I said, crystal power was used with oils that are no longer available. I thought that was very interesting, and of course they're messing around with crystal power now, very much so in the negative as well as the positive. We just have to be very positive about those who understand these things, to work very positively with crystals. And also, one thing I should mention that we were told was when you bring a crystal into your home, I don't know whether I've said this before, it's no good just putting it under the tap and washing it, because it could have come from where it had been used in a negative way. And so prayer has to be used over crystals, and the negativity cleared from any crystals that you bring into your home. Otherwise, it's like a little powerhouse in here for the negative people. However, to carry on. It was suggested that Margot and I should go away, and we decided that we would. This was, when was this? In May 92. And Margot had been working very hard, and she was a widow now and had lost Wally. And so this was the suggestion that we would go away. So, and we looked at the Ho Seasons brochure on canal barge holidays, but that idea turned out to be much too expensive. And Margot had asked for a sign. And in the evening, while I was walking Sheba, that was one of my dogs, and I used to take my dog down to Margot's every evening so that she wouldn't be alone in the house. I would drop the dog off and go home, pick her up again the next morning, so that Margot felt safe in her house, because it was quite a big house. So I was out walking Sheba, and Margot had an out-of-body experience while I was out to Bryston, where she could see a small dish with red decoration and words in black letters. So the next day, we went off to Bryston to find it. And it had turned out to be a small dish decorated with a red dragon and the word Wales in black. So here was our holiday destination, and we were to stay for a few days with Ron and Peggy, that's Wally's brother and his wife, in Llandudno. And we were told that that was where we must go. We must go to Wales. And then in the evening, we were in the crystal room, crystal gazing, where Margot saw a door shut and then opened, and then the master's face came into it. A crystal maze was shown, and she found her way to the centre after about 3 attempts, but easily found her way out. And the master said that if we go to a high place tomorrow, we would hear something further. And John Powles communicated, and he said, all the guides wish us to go away together, not canals, but Wales and mystical places for power. And within 2 weeks of returning, Margot will begin voice mediumship, and I shall have stronger feelings than I'd had then. Apparently, I was told I am held back by domestic problems, which they wish me to be away from. Well, domestic problems, I had this great big house that I was housing so many people in, so that was my domestic problems. However, I did have to continue doing that. But Margot was told that the money would be provided. And then they mentioned, and you know how that is. And Margot used to get money put in her purse. She would have a £10 note put in her purse when there wasn't any money. And so they told her she would be provided for and we would go on holiday. I love it. And John verified that our friendship is very special and to allow no one to alter it. However, that did happen in the future. And in the afternoon, we visited our secret place at Knighton. Now, this is a little place, it's a little hill in Knighton, and we were told to go there. We'd been told to go to Glastonbury earlier on, and we had tried, but something had turned up and we hadn't been able to get there. However, John Powles told us that there was a little hill in Knighton that was very special and we could go there and receive communication. So this is where we went, to our little Knighton tour, as you might call it, where Captain Bennett spoke, saying that we needed to get away from pollution. We needed a holiday and to hire a reliable car. He said, Reg is wise here, as my old 2CV is not suitable for the long drive. He said there were to be many pleasant adventures this summer, but the door of the cage, the rut we were in, needed to be unlocked. Do not hesitate. Go ahead and find your salvation by the journey. Voice mediumship will commence earlier than 2 weeks. And Margot and I had been working with a third person who had joined us after Mary went back to Ireland. We continued to do our crystal scrying, and a third person had joined us, but they told us not to bother about that, not to bother about having a third person. Margot and I could do it on our own, although I didn't see it, but I had to be present there for Margot to do it at that particular time. Yes, she was told to forget anyone else to work with crystals, just the two of us together. Have plenty of rest, but enjoy the dancing. Great expectations, joy and zest. Energy will be given to me, and I will feel more, hear words and my name. We are to stop in 2 special places on the way to pick up energy. And he referred to Margot because he was a captain of a ship, and he said, Margot is on the bridge and I am at the helm. There will be more information before we leave. So we were being guided every single day. We were having information about what we should do in our lives, and this was information about the holiday that we were going on. Then there was an Earthbound. We went to Luckham, which is a little village just outside Ventnor where we live, to rescue Timothy, who told us of having pleasing discourses with a young lady he had met several times at the big houses in the area. One day he met her picking flowers not far from where we sat. It was when the land was flat and the cliffs sheer. Because the land is now called the landslip, because the land has all slipped there. He attempted to take her honour, whereupon she put up a fight and in the struggle fell over the cliff to her death. When he died, he had to return to the spot and had been there ever since. Her death had been put down to the fact that she may have seen the spectre that haunted the area, and in her fright fallen to her death. He said an angel was with him now and told him that he was now forgiven and could go on towards the light of God. Margot saw both Timothy and the angel standing before her, and Timothy had knee breeches and stockings and a wig tied at the back. He was aged about 25 to 30. Nearby where we were sitting, there was a most unusual stone, quite out of place in the landslip, and it was beside a tree. On lifting it up, there were no insects underneath it. Now, usually when you lift up a stone, there's usually a bit of life underneath a stone. Anyway, there wasn't, and it was such a beautiful stone. I picked it up, and I said to Margot, I love this stone, I'm going to take it home. And she picked it up, very heavy stone, about that big, and she said, this stone came from a sylvan glade. So I gave it a name. I called it Sylvan the Glade, and I brought it home and put it under my copper beech tree, by the roots of the copper beech tree at the Grove, and there it stayed for a very long time. In fact, I had occasion to go and get it because it wasn't that I could hear it calling to me, but one day it felt very insistent that I bring this stone. So I popped through my neighbour's garden and picked up the stone, and it now stands under the cherry tree. It sits under the cherry tree at Downlands where I lived in Knighton, and it's quite happy there because it's close to my chalet and where I lived. But I just had the impression that stone was important. I may bring it here one day, but at the moment I think it's happy enough where it is. The importance of stones we're told over and over and over again. Now this is another Earthbound that we did in God's Hill. And his name was George. And he was a grave robber. And he took a body from a grave and gave it to a doctor, for which he was paid 5 shilling for her, is the way he put it. 5 shilling for her. This plagued his conscience all his life, and when he lay dying, he tried to tell his wife, but she was so deaf she couldn't hear him. George said there are 5 angels in God's Hill churchyard. He never really took to them, as they're a bit uppity, in his words. So we had uppity angels in God's Hill churchyard. He wouldn't tell us his full name, as he was afraid his great-great-grandchildren might know. So that was George in God's Hill churchyard. Bless him. God's Hill, of course, is it's high church. It's Church of England, but pretty high church. So perhaps that's why the angels were uppity. according to George. Now this was another guide, and he said, "I am fully aware you intend to make a journey. I hope will be very enjoyable, and that maybe an Earthbound will be released. There are so many of them on the mainland, yet you, the writer, must realise you can only do about 3 or 4 in a week, and you cannot be away too long, as the island has some magical spiritual powers, and certain people, like the 2 of you, are under its influence. To be away for long would be wrong, and so you must go for a short while. The men from space are around the Earth, and we know this. You may see or hear about them. I do hope so. And then he continued, you are watched by the man you love. That was Wally, of course. And I am sure you know this. Now come back here after the return from your journey. Farewell. How lovely. And the journey to Wales, and Kate, my daughter, lent me her car. So we didn't have to hire a car. We just borrowed a car and took off. And this was in 7th of the 6th, 1992. We made good time, starting at 10 a.m. from Lymington and arriving at Llandudno at 6 p.m. to the wonderful hospitality of Wally's brother and his wife. And the 4 of us visited the Great Orme, the mountain that overlooks the town at Llandudno. And in the afternoon we went to Anglesey, where Margot was filled with bittersweet memories, because this is where Wally came from. On her return, she told me that she had been very close. On her return, she told me she'd been very close to Wally's father, having seen him several times, and felt very disoriented, coming back to the Vicarage Gardens, which is where Ron lived at the time. So she'd seen Wally's father in Anglesey. And we went to Aber and visited the little churchyard where Wally's father and mother, Tom and Hildegard, are buried. I love her name, Hildegard. Afterwards we walked to Tannifoel, the home they retired to, in the middle of a field, which is now quite derelict. And it literally was, in the middle of a field. It was a little house, cottage, built in the middle of a field. And it had fallen into rack and ruin. And then into the mountains to the slate quarry and Llanberis Pass. Margot saw a man dressed in a smock and soft felt hat, wielding an axe in Penryn Hall, where we unsuccessfully tried for lunch. And his presence made Margot feel real, and she was glad to leave the place. She said he didn't have a very good aura or feeling about him, this ghost, particularly as he carried an axe. In the slate quarry at Llyn, I'm not sure how to pronounce this because it's a Welsh word, Padarn, she saw a number of fairies, and one was gliding over the water in the pool. And at Aber she was greatly aware of Wally's presence when standing by the grave, and was quite overcome with tears. And then we went on a visit to Bodnant Gardens in the morning and to the Marble Church in the afternoon, where Margot rescued Mary, the servant of Lady Margaret Willoughby de Brock, who had stolen silver from her mistress and sold it to Owen Jones. On our return journey, we went via Betws and Capel Curig. And if anyone's ever been to Wales, Betws is the most beautiful place, and so is Capel Curig. lots of water and boulders in the water and running over the boulders and this wonderful sound. It was just lovely. And then we went on to my home, where I was in the Cotswolds, little village in Toddington. We visited there, and then on to Winchcombe, where I took Margot to meet Margaret Blandford. And Margaret Blandford was a girl who I went to school with. And I came across her quite by chance. I'd gone to stay with my sister-in-law in Bristol, and she said, "You must come and see this medium I go to see, Carolyn. She lives in Winchcombe." So I said, that's not very far from where I used to live, in Toddington. So anyway, Maureen did take me to see this medium that she was seeing regularly. And I sat there quietly while she had her reading, and then she looked at me and she said, "I couldn't give you an ordinary reading," she said, "because everything that's coming through for you is on a very spiritual level." She said, "Do you work on that level?" I said, "Yes, I do." And she said, she didn't know who I was, she just knew I was Maureen's sister-in-law. She said, "I'm looking at you," she said, "and I'm getting your grandmother. And I've had your grandmother for the last few days, Lala." She said, "Who are you?" And I said, she said, "Do you know what happened to Carol and Sue Matthew?" I said, "Well, I'm the Carol Matthew that you're talking to at the moment. And of course, that's my grandmother, Lala." And she said, "Well, do you know, Carolyn, she's been away. She's been around for the last few days, so she must have known you were coming." So anyway, she asked us if we could possibly help find the keys at Soodley Castle, which is in Winchcombe, an old castle. Anyway, John Pels came through and he said on no account was Margot to go to the castle. There was too much evil there, and the keys would eventually be found. But Margot actually had a vision, and she saw where the keys were, and they were lying behind a plant pot. Somebody had obviously put them there, in a lot of dust. But she couldn't go there. And as it turned out, this person that I met, Margaret Blandford, that's her name, she rang up in the morning and said, "I'm sorry," she said, "you can't come." She said, "because we had a break-in and there's police and all sorts of things around the castle." So that was that. We didn't get to Soodley Castle. But that was just another bit of an adventure on our way back from Wales. We saw lots of crop circles on the way home. And then we eventually came home, and one of the guides said, "You have travelled far and now have the faith to return. You have absorbed power beyond description, yet your travelling is not over. I see more journeys for you, so be prepared. Do not worry about the money. There will be enough for the journeys you have to make. Now the other lady," that was me, "has received healing from you with crystal power around you and angelic power, if she regards us as angels. She must keep faith. The strong sun does not suit her skin anymore. Also you yourself must not be out in it too long. You are both creatures of the cool, although you may not agree with me. You will soon use your powers by speaking for some spirit who wishes to communicate, and I shall see all that takes place." So, as I say, we were being guided, looked after, loved, treated, healed, everything. But I must tell you something that used to happen in the crystal room. This is when I had psoriasis on my hands and feet, and I wore gloves all the time. And one of the guides came through, I forget which one it was now, and said, I think it might have been Mary Anning. It was either Mary Anning or one of the Janes. They said they would bring some ointment for my hands. and a pot of ointment was apported into the crystal room, which I used on my hands. And I was told what was in it, and it was sort of floral essences and other things. But sadly it didn't do the trick, and they tried other things, they apported other things, but it didn't do the trick, and it wasn't until I went to Brazil that it was actually healed completely. However, I'm very grateful to everything that I received and all the work I did with Margot. It was amazing, just amazing. You have to go into churches to release those who are trapped. You have to pick up power, and hopefully the other lady will also. She is showing faith, which is a great thing in her favour. Her favourite guide is right by her, right now. Come back soon and seek out wisdom and truth. From us, not by other people's books, which are not always truthful. You are so powerful, and I know your links with those from other planets. They have been around here, and mostly over the sea, so no marks to make everyone excited. I know you are seeking some, and no doubt they will oblige you. I have seen many. A strange being entered the church, yet ran out. It was when a service was taking place. I hope you will come again. The Starmen did leave a message in the sand. It seemed they had no indication that the sea would erase it. Oh, the foolish creatures. I hope you will learn more about them, and I shall endeavour to help all I can. More information. And we had a crystal evening, and the promised voice mediumship began with the words, "Over the bridge to the house, Carla." That just came through Margot when she was meditating and being quiet in the crystal. Anyway, this was strange. We went to Shanklin Beach at the bottom of Apley Steps, where Roshpania, the creature from space, told us he had travelled to Earth with 30 in a large craft that had taken 3 months to get here at a speed incomprehensible to us. 3 of them had left the large craft in a smaller one and had made marks to show the structure of their craft on the sands where we sat, and also further along at Yaverland, but not realising that these would be erased by the incoming tide. They got too close to the water, and the ship and all 3 travellers disintegrated. He told us that his spirit had stayed in order to tell Margot, and now he would be reborn on his own planet that is far nicer than Earth, which he does not like. He thanked her for not running away on hearing his voice. Roshpania. Now you have rescued an earthbound soul from another planet. This I know. Your guides and those of Carolyn can converse with me. That is how I get my information about you both. I know the soul was not like a human earthling. It was sexless in one sense, and it had an extra arm. I know how often you wish you had an extra hand, yet think how awkward it would be if you did. There are several of these crafts around the Earth's atmosphere. They come and go from larger craft, rather like what you would call a space station. Now I do not know whether you will see a mark today, but I feel sure you will before long, and that will be a genuine one. All souls go towards the same Godhead. It makes no difference. There is only one Creator, and you cannot mix with these creatures. They would die speaking with you face to face. Now that's the second time we'd been told that all souls go towards the Godhead, because I believe in my very first talk I spoke about John Powell's, and John said that all souls, no matter what they worship, what religion they are, go to the Godhead, the Creator. And it's lovely to have it verified. Can't wait to go, actually. The world is in such a state. However, and then we found UFO marks at Kingston and Shorewell Fields. And we had a crystal evening, and the voice mediumship with Carla continuing to speak. She said, "I am Carla. I am she. I am the woman you saw. I am Carla Rosso. My husband was French, so powerful, the best and strongest medium. I got my power through the feet. I danced, danced, danced." She said she was standing right beside Margot, and then she danced away. And Margot saw in the crystal a hand encased in a delicate lace glove. Then the master appeared and said, "Your friend won't always wear gloves. Her hands will be well." And as I told you, they were eventually well. And when we were in the crystal room, we tried the tape recorder. However, the master's face appeared in light, and he said we would not get anything while that electrical apparatus was humming. So we couldn't record anything, and we switched it off immediately, and Margot saw a pretty golden-haired young woman. She then had an out-of-body experience and floated up to the ceiling, where she watched this young girl hover over her body and vanish into it. There was a loud whisper, and Carla said, "A new day is dawning, a new beginning. This is the sunrise. You float." Margot saw a beautiful sunrise over mountains, and the master laughing. Now, when we were doing the crystal work, I will speak about the master. He was one of the people who came to talk to Mary and Margot, and we just knew him as the master. In fact, we saw 2 or 3 masters, but this one never gave us a name. He was just the master, and he used to appear in the crystals, and it was as if when Mary and Margot were crystal scrying, they were actually in the scene. It was not something they were just watching like a film. They were actually partaking in the scene. And this is how we got all our information. And I used to write everything down, so nothing was lost. I know you plan a journey to a mystical place. I hope you can get to the top of the tour, but do not worry if you cannot. There is much to see and experience. I doubt whether there will be any Earthbound released. Too much other things to do. Maybe you can get to the Tribunal if it is open. There once was an abbot there that I was interested in. The shops are full of rubbish, but you may find some stones that draw you. Do not hesitate to buy if you feel strongly about it, and be sure to visit the well. Much should be experienced there. I'm sorry you've not had many proper marks to see from space. Maybe later. Come back after you return. Well, We had intended going to Glastonbury. This was one day. But the weather was against us. It was blowing a force 6 gale and raining heavily. And Margot saw a UFO in the morning skimming along over the sea with 3 orange balls of light following in its wake. In that evening, we sat in for crystal scrying, and she sat at the feet of the master on a brightly coloured rug. He was sitting on an ornate armchair and said, "You seek much knowledge. The spirit who calls herself Carla was your twin sister in Lemuria, and you have been together in other lives at different times. You must go to the mystical place, and she will speak after. Do not worry that she doesn't speak tonight." And then someone entered who was wearing a long robe, carrying a tray of papyrus, and said it was writings from his future, and she will be told more. Having decided to go to Glastonbury 2 days later, Margot heard a voice speaking to her. And it just said, Abbe Bear. And it was spelled Abbe Bere. Abbe is French for abbot, and Bear was his name. She didn't know why. She then promptly had an out-of-body experience to God's Hill car park. This is first thing in the morning. To find it's empty, and a car drives in, and a man opens the window, and he's got this brochure in his hand, and he's just looking at it, and he threw a piece of paper out of his window with the words Glastonbury Tribunal on it. Now that was the place we'd been told to go to. So she rang me up. We went to the car park, horrified to see that it was all being swept up and there was a little bonfire. And we thought, oh no. And she went to where she'd seen this man throw this piece of paper out, and it was caught under a stone and it hadn't been picked up. And it was a brochure about the tribunal, showing a drawing of it, and there was mention of Abbot Bear. Well, that was just the beginning of our story of Glastonbury. It was amazing that somebody would drive in, throw this piece of paper out, Margot would have an OBE, find the paper, Glastonbury Tribunal, Abbot Bear. Right. That was just, as I say, that was just the beginning. And then one of the guides said, "Tomorrow you go to a mystical place where both good and bad have happened. I hope you both only experience the good. Any feeling of bad, leave, wherever you are." Now, I've got this little book, and it's called Glastonbury, and it's a very old little book. And for those of people who watch this and don't know Glastonbury, because it seems that a lot of people are watching these little talks that I do, I thought I would just read the first page because it's just entitled Glastonbury, Inniswitrin, Isle of Avalon. The beginnings of Glastonbury, extending far beyond the dawn of recorded history, are lost in the realm of myth and legend, and will probably ever remain shrouded in mystery. The myths passing because people no longer believe them, the mystery enduring because no man has yet fathomed its secrets. Mythical as many of the stories are now held to be, it is not surprising that they have been enhanced by accumulative legendary lore and clothed in a robe of romance. The myths and legends that hover around Glastonbury are like the summer mists that creep silently over the moorland and blot out the landscape and leave us in a world of ghostly mystery. The position of Glastonbury in respect of the surrounding water is indicated by its name, Inniswitrin, the glassy isle, witrin being a form of Wye, the Celtic word for water. Glastonbury is a creation which is sprung from the sea. The weird marshes and salt sea lakes of the Seymour Cetus, the chosen home of the Seymour settlers, who gave the name to Somerset. Ages before the foundation of its monastery, Glastonbury was famous, probably throughout Europe, as the Celtic paradise, the happy island of the blessed. In all probability, the earliest religion of man was a kind of ghost lore. The riddle of life puzzled him as it sometimes puzzles us today. And when the dead returned to him in his dreams, these dreams may have aroused in him a dim conception of a future life. Thus man came to have ideas of another world and another life after death. He came to believe that the souls of the dead were borne westward toward the setting sun, to an island in the western sea, to the abode of Glast and Avala, being ferried across the hazy sea by rowers whom a secret influence impelled. Thus, in later times, was Arthur to be born to the island valley of Avilion. In this island of mystery was a mystic cauldron of regeneration into which the dead were dipped and from which they sprang into a new life. That's just a little bit about Glastonbury, this mystical, magical place that we were about to set foot on. Now these are Margot's words, because she wrote her story. Having planned to go to Glastonbury on Monday, July the 13th, this is 1992, I spent the night at the Grove, the home of my friend Carolyn, as we were to make an early start on Monday. I awoke to a howling wind accompanied by driving rain, so did the sensible thing and postponed the journey. I returned home feeling very disappointed. As I looked over the sea from my bedroom window, I was amazed to see very clearly a UFO travelling at great speed with 3 round orange lights behind it. The craft was silver and like 2 arcs joined together. In a matter of seconds, it was out of sight. Returning to my lounge, one of my spiritual guides spoke, telling me it was a UFO I had seen, and not many people could see anything that travelled at such speed. When I eventually get to the mystical place, I should be contacted by beings from space. A little later, Another guide told me that had it influenced me to look out of the window at that particular moment to witness the craft from space, with 3 crew members aboard. This had come from another, much larger craft, far beyond my sight, which cannot be picked up by radar, as they are able to put up barriers and so cannot be seen. About 2 weeks before the visit, a guide had spoken and told me to visit the Tribunal, if it was open. Neither Carolyn nor I knew of this. On the morning of the 14th of July, I heard a French voice say, "Abbé Bear." This made no sense to me either. A few moments later, I had an out-of-body experience and travelled in my astral body to the large car park at Godshill, a very pretty village about 5 miles away, where I saw a black car drive in. I watched the man inside tear the cover from a brochure, fold it carefully so that the words Glastonbury Tribunal were clearly visible. He then threw this out of his window and drove off, whereupon I returned to my physical body. I phoned Carolyn and told her of this incident. She collected me and drove me immediately to the car park. And then she goes on about the fire. "My heart sank," she said. "Was my precious piece of paper already on the fire?" No, we were lucky, as after a few minutes' search, I picked up a folded piece of paper that was caught on a sharp stone to see written across it, Glastonbury Tribunal. I unfolded it to read part of the history of the tribunal, and Abbé Bear's name leapt from the page. We finally arrived at Glastonbury at 1 p.m. on July the 15th and made our way to the Abbey ruins, making the kitchen our first port of call. We read the display boards giving the history of the Abbey, and in one corner was the remains of a stone oven. And as I looked at it, I experienced a time slip. Suddenly, the place was a hive of activity. 3 brown-garbed monks were supervising roughly clad servants who were running to and fro. One was cutting vegetables on a long table, while 2 were placing pans in the oven. There was a young boy carrying 2 leather buckets of water, and these he placed beside the table, picked up 2 empty ones, and went outside, presumably to the well. I returned to the present. Carolyn was still reading the boards. We then made our way to the tor and climbed to the top, where I had another time slip. I was suddenly looking down on an ancient lake settlement of round wattle dwellings. Fires were burning in the open. There were children running around and people clad in crude garments of uncertain materials. Some were working with cooking pots, some were carving, and others were making objects. I knew at once I was seeing the settlement in which I had once lived in a past life. The scene vanished, and we entered the ruined tower, where I heard the chanting of monks and religious singing. Leaving the tor, we visited the Chalicewell Gardens, where I was aware of fairies and elves flying around everywhere. And strolling back through the gardens, I cleansed my healing crystals in the circular pool and became aware that I was not alone. Looked up to see an angel standing beside the little waterfall. The following morning we visited the Tribunal, which is now a museum, with many artefacts from a lake village on display. This was once the courthouse for the abbey, where Abbot Bear presided over the court and administered justice. Inside one of the rooms was a 17-foot canoe that had been dug out of a peat bog, and as Carolyn and I stood looking at this, a shower of small stones fell from nowhere on the stone floor. They just fell from the ceiling in front of us. We got down on our knees to find them, and we were scratching around the floor, and we found 3 little rose quartz crystals. And then one of her guides whispered in her ear there were 5 stones in all. We searched unsuccessfully for the other 2 for about 10 minutes, and then getting down on our hands and knees, and luckily there was no one else present to see this, the 2 missing stones materialised in front of our eyes. A very mystical happening. Almost immediately I heard a voice. It was the occupant of a UFO, who said he had thrown the stones to attract my attention, and that they had been taken from a shop nearby, which he explained was easy for them to do. He went on to say that only one person in a certain century had heard the voice and seen the craft of one of his ancestors, and that was Abbot Bear. He said I had a power that is beyond most of the human race and would be contacted again in a few days. That was a very strange experience. Luckily there was no one else there when all this happened. And leaving Glastonbury, we headed for Avebury, where we saw a clear crop formation in a field about a couple of miles before reaching Avebury itself. We spent a short time in the village, having lunch in the local inn, and, this is Margot speaking, remember, I bought a fantastic stone of onyx and crystal in the henge shop, and then visited one of the standing stones I had been particularly attached to in an earlier lifetime, and I believe I've spoken of that too in another one of my talks. We travelled on towards Alton Barns, seeing another set of crop circles in the countryside, the familiar dumbbell shape, then to the field below Adam's grave, where the amazing pictogram of 1990 had been. There was a formation once more in the same field. A man sat in a caravan charging £1 to enter, and a notice saying Crop Circle Car Park. We paid our money and began the long trek towards the strange formation. I found it full of power and energy, and my pendulum confirmed this. And finally, we drove back to the ferry and home. A few days later, a guide told me to sit quietly on a high place on the island, where I would be contacted by a creature from a spacecraft. Carolyn and I went to the downland way overlooking the Arraton Valley. And presently I heard a metallic-sounding male voice that said, "Massa Micey." And I was told that this was their formal telepathic greeting in his silent world. He informed me it was he who had spoken in the tribunal, and those from his craft had made what we call pictograms on the island. But soon afterwards these were ruined by heavy rain and strong wind. The wind howled, and this was a sound unknown to him. He said that people would call their marks wind marks. He told me I have a power undiscovered as yet. I am anxious to find out what this is. He told me that I am watched, and continued that the men of Earth have unusual ideas of how these marks in the crops are made. Why cannot they face up to the truth? It distressed him to see what a mess we are making of our planet. He said he would contact me again, and ended up with the same words, Massa Micey. 3 days later, I had an out-of-body experience to Crocker Lane, near Knighton, where I could see a small brass cup on the ground. That afternoon, Carolyn drove me to the lane, and I soon located the position, and there lay the object I had seen while astral travelling. Looking closely at the cup, we noticed it was of Indian origin and decorated with several of the Hindu gods, Kali, Shiva and Ganesh. We wondered if those from other planets had animal heads or several arms as depicted. I think our conversation was heard, as several moments later I heard, "Masa Maisi to you, who would fit into our planet. So few earthlings use their mind to hear from afar, yet we do this all the time. We do not have the heads of animals, yet there are planets who have such creatures. Whoever designed the figures on the brassware must have seen these creatures." He said he despaired of planet Earth with so much fighting, explosions and needless poisoning of plants and animals, and feared for the consequences, and felt sad when a new earthling was born. He told me to enjoy what is left of Earth while it is still livable, and to listen to him. They do not fight, poison or kill unless it is absolutely necessary, and then there are meetings of the seniors to arrange it. Go in peace, and you will hear one more time. I have already mentioned the onyx and crystal stone I bought at Avebury, and to my surprise, on August the 3rd, a voice spoke to me as I sat at my home. Permit me to introduce myself. My name is George Watson. I lived an interesting and wealthy life and travelled widely. The magnetism of the onyx stone you have recently purchased is the reason for my intrusion into your rest. It once belonged to me. I was an ardent collector of minerals, and this was a very rare specimen. I possessed 3 pieces. All came originally from South America. All 3 pieces were kept together after my death and came into the hands of a dealer who sold them, along with other minerals, to the shop where you saw them. I am sorry you could not have all 3 pieces. Yet I understand you have a limited income and could not afford them all. I am pleased you have this. This piece, as it is a very good specimen and exceedingly powerful for any spiritual work. May you find much pleasure looking at it, and may it bring health and prosperity towards you. Thank you for your attention. I shall now return to the place where peace and serenity can be reached. I had experienced a feeling in the shop in Avebury that I must buy that stone, that I could ill afford, and now I know why. On the 8th of August, I received the final communication from the friendly man from the stars. Carolyn and I returned to the high downs and greeted our unseen acquaintance with the words, "Masa Maisi," with positive results. Masa Maisi, back to you. This I was waiting for. I know you wish to hear more about my planet and myself. My planet is in a different solar system, planet number 6. We speak in silence. That is as near as I can get. Numbers mean more than names, yet I am called Obitan, which means son of space. There are others around, and no doubt they will speak. I have tried 5 different people who I thought could hear me. One picked up 2 words, the others heard nothing. You are the one who hears. I know this is the last time I shall communicate before I return to my planet. It will not take very long. Your primitive craft would take many lifetimes to reach us, but thought is the key to power, as well as a very advanced machine. We live in small groups and have shelter like earthlings, yet are so different in many other ways. We are peaceful. What is happening to man with such horrific things going on and the earth beginning to die? Now I will bid you farewell. May you live in peace and tranquillity. Marsa Maisi. The 2-day Glastonbury holiday lasted from July the 13th until August the 8th in the psychic sense. And with that, I will leave you. So often we have been told that this earth is in a disastrous position, really, because of what man has done to it. And we only have to look outside our doors today to see the chemtrails in the sky, which have now started again. And whatever else is going on this planet that is so horrific, Mother Earth is getting ready to do a clearance, I think. And that clearance is called humanity, but it's up to us. We have the choice. We have the choice as to whether we change to the big C and whether those people who are in charge change. I doubt it. They are on a fixed agenda and they're just sticking to it. However, people are waking up and the light is getting brighter. And as I've said before, it's all about balancing the light and the dark. And this is what we try to do. This is what I try to do in telling my stories. And give people an understanding that death is not the end. It's just another adventure. Far more peaceful than this, but we chose to come here. We had the contract and we're fulfilling it. And long may it carry on. Long may the stories carry on. Although they are getting a little more serious these days. However, I wish you all well who listen, and thank you, Sam, for filming this. It was very powerful when we were doing it. I mean, we experienced just so much energy, so much wherever we went. It was, the elementals, the angels, time slips.
You were led by the hand every step of the way.
Every step of the way.
And Margot does sound very special and unique with her gift, because there are lots of people listening out and trying to become channels, I think, and so few of those people actually have the gift or the ability to learn how to hear clearly.
Yes.
But she was one of those rare people.
She was very, very rare. And my friendship with her was very important. Very important.
You read a passage where it said, we could not speak to you face to face because we would die, or you would die.
Yes, that wasn't the Plasatians, it was Rushpania. They would die.
Why?
Because, as I remember once there was a time when I spoke about the extraterrestrials, and one of them said, if we came close to you, we would die, because humans exude something that is poisonous to some of these beings that are not human themselves. And that is what it is. And also because we've polluted the earth so much. Whereas in ancient times they could communicate with us face to face, they can no longer do that because of what we've done to the planet.
Yeah. And another thing was, there seems to be a lot of earthbound in churches. Is that because they were buried there, or because they gravitate to
They
the
gravitate
church?
towards there because there are prayers. There are prayers said there, and they're holy places, even though they've been sometimes misused, but they are still holy places, and very often you must remember that churches were built on the old pagan sites of power, so that the church held the power, and earthbound souls gravitate towards them. Sometimes there can be many in a church, and yet they won't see each other because they've come from different centuries. But they will be there, but they will still be in their time doing their thing.
And the damage that's being done to the world and the pollution and everything else, I mean, it's being done by maybe 1% of the population.
Yes.
But this 1% have the wealth and the power and the material possessions and the control and the infrastructure to manipulate the course of the world. And 99% of the people, I think, are good-hearted, and they recycle and they treat each other with respect and love and kindness. And it seems wrong that we're all being tarred with the same brush and we're all being sent in the same direction because of the sins and the insensitivity and the greed of 1%.
Of the few. But behind the few, behind the 1% is what?
Behind the one...
Non-human.
In that case, the ETs who are in a higher position intellectually and spiritually and technologically, rather than condemning us and saying it's a shame you're destroying your planet and I hope you can turn things around, I mean, the people they're speaking to are doing everything they can in their power to turn things around, but their power is limited compared to this 1%. And it would be...
It is, because there is what's the word I want? It's non-interference. It's called, yes, it's non-interference. It isn't that they're not allowed to interfere, or perhaps that is the way of the universe, that they don't interfere with other people's lives, in the same way that we don't interfere in our neighbours' lives. We care for them, we speak to them, we acknowledge them and help where we can, because that's the kind of humanity, that's most of humanity. But there are some of humanity who are psychopaths and who have no feeling, no empathy, no love, who hate humanity and don't want anything to do with them, and refer to humanity as not cannon fodder, but useless eaters. You and I can't understand that, because we look at them and they're people, or they appear to be people, but in fact they too are being controlled. And you see, control is so... when you get into wealth and power, control is so easy to blackmail people. It's so easy to film them in a compromising situation.
And bribe them.
And bribe them and hold them to account. And, you know, that's just the way of life, sadly.
Well, we can...
But we have to change it.
We can do the utmost we can within our sphere of influence to
Yes.
change things
Yes.
for the better.
That's all we can do. We can't change anybody else. We can only change ourselves. We can only become aware of the Creator and do the will of the Creator. Thy will be done
And
in
by,
and through me.
And by raising our frequency, perhaps that ripples out and touches others.
It does. It does. It's just like a pebble in a pool. It just goes right out to the end of the universe. Your compassionate feeling, your love.
And do you believe that if the earth becomes very polarised in terms of there being very spiritual, loving people and very dark, greedy, service-to-self people, that there will be a divergence and a split, like Dolores Cannon spoke
Yes,
of
I
with
do.
the New Earth?
Yes, I do.
so that each to their own just desert sort of thing.
Yes.
And one Earth may end up being destroyed and one Earth may end up moving into a golden age and flourishing, because the souls of those split into two timelines.
That's it.
Parallel realities.
Yes. I remember being told it's like an onion with layers, round, and the different timelines going on and different things going on in each layer. And as you raise in frequency and consciousness, so you move on to another layer.
And perhaps we are bouncing between timelines quite a lot. There seems to be like lots of streams intersecting, and we can perhaps hop from one to another.
Unknown to ourselves. And sometimes I've said things to Reg, and I know it's happened, and he said, no, it didn't happen, no. And I say, oh well, perhaps I just slipped into another timeline where it did happen, and it's in my memory, but it's not in his.
So you, just to reiterate, you definitely think that there's a separation.
There is a separation coming, but we're going to go through a lot of pain to get there.
You don't think that we might have already slipped into a positive timeline?
I think we're sort of like that at the moment. Yes. Robin has told me there's a lot coming, which he's going to let me have. And I will go on to the sort of latest information that we've received from him, because he is my source of information. But what I found, I don't know whether I've said this to you before, but what I found so interesting is that when I finished with Margot, I was working with the extraterrestrials a lot, all those beings who spoke with us and told us things, and then I had a year and a half with nothing after I left working with Margot, which was the year of the void, I called it. And then Robin started. And immediately it was the elders of Zor from their planet, who were so concerned about planet Earth and what was going on. It was the moment we've set off. I mean, I suppose they'd left us alone, really, or perhaps not alone, because I'm sure some people had been hearing things. Einstein, Tesla, Steiner, and all these people were hearing from beings who weren't of this earth. And I think the moment we set off the atom bomb and we had the power to destroy our planet, and we've already destroyed it once at the time of Atlantis, we've already caused so much destruction. And this is when they began to become really interested, because we can now we're affecting them as well. This is the thing. They're very concerned that we have this power and we don't have the spiritual understanding of how to use it. We just use it for selfish ends and war. I mean, this is a planet of war, warmongering. They speak about Mars being a planet of war, but Earth is certainly a warmongering planet, or some of the people on the planet are warmongers. And of course money drives people, and money brings power, and power brings lack of responsibility. It's just do as I want to do, and I'll do as I please, and hang the rest of you. But, death is not the end. That's the lovely thing about it. Death is not the end. It's just we're on a journey here, and we're trying to get Earth straight. But if we don't manage it, we don't die. And depending on what we've done, as to whether we come back to 3D and do it all again, and try and put it right again. But those who are committing all these sins against humanity at the moment, I'm sure they'll have thousands of years of reincarnation onto 3D and see how they like that. Because they won't come back as rich and powerful next time.
That's why they're trying to live forever through transhumanism and
that is why
genetic
that is
engineering.
exactly so they don't have to face death. They're terrified of death, terrified of the responsibility of or accepting the responsibility of what they've done. However, having said that, I truly believe that we have to find forgiveness for all this, the atrocities, somewhere along the line. Because, as I say to people, when I talk to them, or when they ask me to talk to them, I said, we've done all this. You know, you and I have done this in another time, in another place. Otherwise, we wouldn't know about it. We have to experience everything. And we have to experience being wonderfully good and extremely evil. And so, just because now, you know, we've come to realise that we've been everything, we've done everything, and really there's nothing much more to do in 3D, except try and get it straight.